The little black girl texted the biker as unknown riders surrounded the courthouse steps in absolute silence. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get into the story. It was a cold, crisp morning when the little girl sat huddled in the corner of the small courthouse restroom, her fingers trembling as she typed the text that could change everything. Her heart pounded in her chest as she glanced around nervously, checking the hallway to make sure no one was watching. The heavy footsteps of the security guards echoed through the courthouse, but she was alone in her little hideaway. Please help me. They're taking me, she typed quickly, hitting send before she could stop herself. She had no idea if he would even see the message in time, but she had to try. Her father's words echoed in her mind. If anything happens, you find him. You trust him. He's the only one who will protect you. A lump formed in her throat as she stared at the screen, her eyes brimming with tears. Maya Jenkins had never felt so afraid in her life. Her stepfather had been abusive for as long as she could remember, but today was different. Today, she was trapped in the courthouse with him, and he was not going to let her go. She had tried to speak out, tried to get someone to listen, but no one seemed to care. Her stepfather was a respected police officer, and he was used to getting what he wanted. He had promised her mother that she would be safe, but Maya knew the truth. She wasn't safe. Not from him. Not from anyone. As the minutes passed, Maya's anxiety grew. She had heard the whispers, the rumors about her stepfather, and the things he had done. She had seen the cold, calculating look in his eyes when he thought no one was watching. She couldn't trust him. She couldn't trust anyone in that courthouse. Except for one person. The biker. The man who had promised her father that he would always look out for her. Maya had never met him in person, but she remembered the promise he had made at her father's funeral. She had clung to that memory as a lifeline. And now, as she waited in the cold, dark bathroom, she was holding on to that promise more than ever. Her phone buzzed. She froze, afraid that someone might have seen her send a message. But no one came. Maya dared to glance at her phone. It was a reply. I'm on my way. Hold on, kid. We're coming. A wave of relief washed over her, but it was quickly replaced by fear. They were coming. But would they get here in time? Would they be able to stop her stepfather from taking her away? The courthouse doors creaked open. Maya's heart skipped a beat as she heard the footsteps approaching. Her stepfather was coming. She had to move fast. She wiped away her tears and stuffed her phone back into her pocket. She took a deep breath, steadying herself for what was to come. She couldn't run. Not yet. She had to wait. Wait for them to arrive. She had to hold on. Time seemed to slow down as she heard the faint rumble of motorcycles in the distance. The sound grew louder, stronger. It was them. The bikers. They had arrived. And they were about to surround the courthouse, ready to protect Maya from the man who had tormented her for so long. The sound of rumbling engines was getting louder and louder, vibrating the ground beneath her feet. Maya felt the tension in the air tighten like a noose. She pressed her back against the cold, tiled wall of the courthouse restroom, her heart racing as she strained to listen for any signs of movement. The reply from the biker echoed in her mind, giving her a glimmer of hope, but it was quickly clouded by the fear of what was happening outside. Her stepfather had been growing more and more impatient, and she knew he would stop at nothing to take her back. She had no one else. Just him. And now, maybe the bikers. As the sound of motorcycles continued to grow, Maya clenched her fists, her nails digging into her palms. Her body was shaking with fear, but it wasn't just fear for herself anymore. It was for the bikers who were coming, for the strangers who might get caught up in her fight. She had no idea what she had just set into motion, but there was no turning back. She knew she was trapped in this battle between her stepfather, the law, and now, the people she had begged for help. Minutes felt like hours as she waited, her eyes fixed on the door, expecting it to burst open at any moment. Finally, she heard it, the unmistakable sound of heavy boots approaching. She froze, her heart pounding in her chest as her stepfather walked past the restroom door. He had no idea that anything was about to change. Maya took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. She couldn't let him see her afraid. She couldn't let him know that she was already starting to lose hope. The bikers were getting closer, and she had to hold on, just a little longer. As the footsteps faded, the door to the restroom swung open, and there he was, her stepfather. He stood in the doorway for a moment, looking down at her with cold, calculating eyes. His uniform was neat, his badge shining in the dim light. Maya wanted to scream, but she couldn't. He was the one in control. "You're coming with me," he said, his voice low and threatening. Maya stood up, her legs trembling beneath her. She knew what he was capable of, and the thought of going with him made her sick to her stomach. But before she could say anything, she heard it. The roar of engines, cutting through the tense silence. The sound was unmistakable now. The bikers had arrived. Maya's stepfather's expression shifted, his eyes narrowing as he turned toward the window. The sound of the engines was deafening, but it wasn't just the sound of motorcycles. It was the sound of hundreds of riders who had come to protect her. The bikers were here, and they weren't backing down. "What the hell is this?" her stepfather muttered under his breath, looking out the window in disbelief. Maya stepped back, her heart pounding in her chest. She could see the motorcycles lined up in formation, their chrome gleaming in the afternoon sun. There were dozens, no, hundreds of them. Bikers who had come to stand between her and the man who had tormented her for so long. Maya couldn't believe her eyes. She had heard the stories, but this was real. These were not just men on motorcycles. They were her salvation. As she stood there, staring at the riders, the doors to the courthouse opened, and a figure stepped through. He was tall, wearing a leather jacket with a snarling wolf patch on the back. His face was weathered, but there was something in his eyes, a deep, quiet strength. The biker walked toward her, his boots echoing in the silence. Maya's heart skipped a beat as he approached. This was him. This was the biker who had promised her father he would protect her. He didn't say a word as he reached her side, but the look in his eyes said everything. He was here. He was not going to let her down. "You're safe now," he said quietly, his voice calm but firm. "We've got you." Maya's breath caught in her throat as the weight of the moment hit her. She had never felt so small, so vulnerable, and yet, in this moment, she also felt a glimmer of something she hadn't felt in so long. Hope. The biker turned and gestured to the other riders, who began to move into position, taking their places outside the courthouse. The sound of the engines roared to life once again, shaking the building with their power. Maya's stepfather looked at the biker and then at the sea of riders outside. He knew this wasn't going to be easy. His grip on the situation was slipping, and he didn't like it. He turned back to Maya, his face hardening. "This isn't over," he growled. The biker stepped closer, his presence imposing. "It is now," he said quietly. The tension in the air was palpable, but the bikers were ready. Maya was ready, and for the first time in her life, she wasn't alone. The biker stood tall beside Maya, his hand resting reassuringly on her shoulder. The weight of the situation was clear, but the presence of the riders outside gave Maya a sense of safety she hadn't known in years. The courthouse was quiet, the tension thick in the air as the sound of motorcycles filled the streets. Her stepfather's eyes flickered nervously from the window to the biker standing next to her. He knew the bikers weren't just here for show. They were here to make sure she was safe. "This is over," the biker said again, his voice calm but unyielding. Maya's stepfather clenched his jaw, his hand twitching at his side. His position of power was slipping, and he knew it. The silence in the courthouse was deafening. "You're not taking her," the biker added, his tone final. Maya had never heard such certainty before, and it was like a shield wrapping around her. Outside, the hum of motorcycle engines revving up echoed through the courthouse walls. The riders were preparing, taking positions, making sure there was no way for her stepfather to take her without facing a confrontation he wasn't prepared for. Maya's stepfather shifted uncomfortably, looking from the bikers to the courthouse security who had been standing nearby, unsure of what to do. The bikers had already made it clear, this wasn't just about one girl anymore. It was about standing up for what was right. "You'll regret this," her stepfather warned, but the biker didn't flinch. "We've been down that road before," the biker replied, his gaze unwavering. "And we won't let it happen again." Maya felt a surge of hope rise within her as the realization hit her. She was not alone. These people, these bikers, had come for her. They were fighting for her, not just for one more promise kept, but for a future where she was safe. Call the cops. The biker continued, his voice steady. But don't think they'll be able to stop us. Maya's stepfather's face turned pale, the realization sinking in. There were too many of them. Too many who weren't afraid to stand up for what was right. His grip on the situation was gone. And the moment the doors of the courthouse opened, the bikers would be ready. Outside, the motorcycles were lined up, their engines purring in unison. A massive wall of leather and steel stood ready, and Maya could feel the weight of their presence. They weren't just here to stand around. They were here to make sure she wasn't taken from this place. The doors opened, and the first of the bikers began to walk in. One by one, they filed into the courthouse, their boots echoing against the tiled floor. It wasn't just a show of force, it was a declaration. Maya's heart raced, a mix of fear and relief washing over her. She had never felt so exposed, yet so protected. Her stepfather stood frozen for a moment, his mouth agape as the bikers filled the room. There were no threats, no violent words. They just stood, a solid line between Maya and him. The atmosphere was tense, the only sound now the hum of the bikes outside and the rustling of uniforms. It was like a standoff, but no one knew how it would end. She's not leaving with you, the biker leader said once more, his eyes locking with Maya's stepfather. Not now, not ever. The tension built, hanging thick in the air. Maya's stepfather knew there was no way out. His eyes darted around the room, but it was too late. He had underestimated the power of the promise Maya's father had made all those years ago. The biker's words carried the weight of that promise, and with each step he took, they became more real. You should have left her alone, the biker said quietly, his voice cutting through the silence like a blade. Now you'll answer for it. The door to the courtroom closed behind them, sealing their fate. Maya's stepfather stood alone in the room now, the weight of his choices settling on him. The bikers stood firm, resolute in their mission. The fight was over. Maya was safe. The silence that followed was deafening, but it was the silence of victory. For the first time in years, Maya felt a peace she hadn't known was possible. The bikers had come for her, and they wouldn't leave until she was safe. The courthouse stood in complete silence, the stillness stretching between the bikers and Maya's stepfather. The tension in the air was so thick it felt suffocating, the weight of the moment pressing down on everyone inside the room. Maya stood quietly beside the biker leader, Jack, as they stared down her stepfather, who had yet to make a move. His confidence, which had once been so apparent, now wavered, replaced by a nervous energy that rippled through him. He was trapped. The door behind him opened slowly, and Maya's heart skipped a beat. Through the door, a familiar face stepped inside, Elena Vargas, the social worker. She had been the one to call Jack earlier, the one who had been trying to keep Maya safe in this battle between the law and her abuser. Her eyes were wide with disbelief at the scene unfolding before her. It wasn't the sight of the bikers or the confrontation that shocked her, but the realization that Maya's stepfather was no longer in control. Jack's gaze never wavered from Maya's stepfather. "This ends now," he said, his voice steady but carrying the weight of years of loyalty and promises kept. Elena stepped forward, her voice shaking slightly as she spoke. "We need to talk about what happens next. This isn't just about the custody battle anymore. There are other things we need to address." Maya's stepfather shifted uneasily, his eyes darting around the room as though looking for an escape. But there was none. The bikers were surrounding him, and every exit was blocked. For the first time in years, Maya felt a sense of control over her own life. No longer was she the helpless girl in the corner of the room, praying for someone to intervene. Now, she was the one watching as the man who had tormented her for so long was slowly losing his grip. Jack turned his attention to Elena, his expression hardening as he listened to her. "What do you mean?" he asked. Elena hesitated, but then spoke in a low, firm tone. "There are allegations of corruption. Maya's stepfather, Patrick Donovan, isn't just her abuser. He's been manipulating the system to cover his tracks. We've received reports that he's been using his position to intimidate people, to hide evidence of his abuse. It's not just a custody issue anymore. It's a criminal one." Jack's face darkened, the weight of Elena's words sinking in. "We need to make sure he doesn't walk away from this. He's not just getting away with hurting Maya. He's been using his badge to protect himself." The room fell silent as those words hung in the air. Maya's stepfather, visibly shaken, opened his mouth as though to speak, but no words came out. He looked around the room, at the bikers who stood tall and unwavering, and then at Maya, who finally stood firm and unafraid. He knew it was over. But just as quickly as the silence had settled, the door to the courthouse burst open again, and more bikers flooded into the room. Their presence was like a wall of strength, a testament to their loyalty and determination. The room had become a fortress, one that Maya's stepfather couldn't break through, no matter how hard he tried. The new arrivals didn't speak a word. They simply stood behind the original group, their eyes locked on Maya's stepfather with the same unblinking resolve. Jack took a deep breath and looked at Maya. "It's time," he said, his voice calm but resolute. He turned back to the room, his voice rising. "This man is not leaving here with Maya. He will face the consequences of his actions, and we'll make sure of it." Maya stood straighter, feeling a surge of courage flood through her. For the first time in her life, she wasn't afraid of him anymore. The bikers had come for her, and they weren't going anywhere until she was safe. She looked at Jack, her voice quiet but strong. "Thank you," she said, her words carrying more weight than she could have ever imagined. Jack nodded, his eyes softening for the first time. "We're family now," he said simply. "And we protect family." With those words, Maya knew that she was finally free. Free from the grip of her stepfather. Free from the fear that had haunted her for so long. The bikers had come, and they had kept their promise. But more than that, they had given her something she hadn't thought was possible: hope. The door to the courthouse opened again, but this time, it wasn't her stepfather that stepped through. It was the law. Police officers entered, their eyes scanning the room. They were here for the paperwork, to handle the next steps, to make sure that justice was served. And with the bikers standing in solidarity with Maya, there was no question that justice would be done. The room remained still as the police officers entered the courthouse, their uniforms sharp and crisp against the dim light of the room. They moved methodically, their eyes scanning the scene, assessing the bikers who filled the space like a solid wall. But it was not fear they saw in the faces of the riders. No, it was determination, loyalty, and an unwavering commitment to the promise they had made to a young girl. The bikers stood firm, their eyes sharp and focused, ready for whatever came next. Maya stood beside Jack, her small hand clutching the sleeve of his leather jacket as she took in the sight before her. Her stepfather, Patrick Donovan, was no longer the intimidating figure he once was. Now, he stood exposed in the middle of the room, his posture slumped, his confidence shattered. The bikers had surrounded him, not with weapons or threats, but with a quiet strength that spoke louder than any words could. Maya felt a strange calm wash over her as she realized the danger was finally over. She had come to the courthouse terrified, afraid that her stepfather's influence would win again, that no one would be there to stop him. But the bikers had shown up, and they had kept their word. They had come to protect her, no matter the cost. As the officers approached, the tension in the room shifted. They had come to do their jobs, to take over the situation and ensure the law took its course. But the bikers were not backing down. Jack stepped forward, his tall figure casting a shadow over the room. His voice was steady, his tone unyielding. "This man is not leaving here with Maya. He will face the charges, and he will answer for what he's done," Jack said, his words firm. The officer in charge, a tall man with a stern face, looked at Jack, then back at the bikers, who stood tall and unwavering. He could sense the gravity of the situation, but he also knew that the bikers were not just some gang looking to cause trouble. They were a brotherhood, and they were determined to see justice done. "We understand," the officer said, his voice low, acknowledging the bikers' resolve. "We'll take it from here, but we need to make sure everything is documented, and that the process is followed." Jack nodded, but his gaze didn't leave Maya's stepfather. He was waiting for the moment when the law would catch up with him, when the man who had tormented Maya for so long would finally face the consequences. Maya, for her part, was no longer the scared little girl she had been when she first walked into the courthouse. She was standing tall, her eyes now filled with a mixture of relief and strength. She had survived, and now it was time for the world to see the truth. The police officer motioned to his colleagues, and they moved toward Patrick Donovan, taking him into custody. Maya's stepfather didn't resist. There was no point in fighting anymore. The bikers had made it clear that he would not escape the law this time. As the officers led him away, the bikers remained in place, their eyes following every movement. There was no celebration, no loud cheers. Just a quiet sense of victory. The bikers had done what they had come to do. They had kept their promise. Jack turned to Maya, a soft smile on his face. "You're safe now," he said gently. Maya looked up at him, her heart swelling with gratitude. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice trembling. Jack nodded, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "You're part of our family now," he said, his voice low but full of meaning. "And we'll always protect our own." Maya felt tears well up in her eyes as she looked around at the bikers who had become her protectors. They weren't just a group of tough, leather-clad individuals. They were a family, bound by loyalty and love, and they had proven that when it mattered most. The doors of the courthouse opened again, and this time, it was not her stepfather being led away. It was the promise of a new beginning for Maya. The bikers had shown her what it meant to be truly protected. They had kept their word, and in doing so, they had given her back something she hadn't realized she had lost: her trust in people. As the bikers filed out of the courthouse, they did so quietly, without fanfare, but with the knowledge that they had made a difference. They had kept a promise, and that was enough. The sun had already set by the time the last biker rolled out of the courthouse parking lot, the sound of roaring engines gradually fading into the distance. Maya stood there, still processing everything that had just happened, her mind spinning with a mixture of relief and disbelief. Her life had just changed in ways she had never expected, and the world she had once known felt like a distant memory. The courthouse, now silent and almost empty, seemed so different from when she first walked in, terrified and unsure of what was going to happen next. Now, she felt a sense of strength that had been missing for so long. Jack, the biker who had promised her father to keep her safe, stood beside her. His presence was unwavering, solid, and comforting. She had never expected this kind of protection, but now, as she looked up at him, she knew that she was finally safe. "You did it," Maya said, her voice barely above a whisper. "You kept your promise." Jack smiled, though it was a soft, knowing smile. "We always keep our promises," he said. "You're part of our family now. We protect family." Maya nodded, the weight of his words sinking in. She was part of something bigger now, a family that was bound by loyalty, honor, and the unspoken understanding that no one would ever be left behind. It was a feeling she had never experienced before, and it gave her a sense of peace she hadn't thought was possible. Her stepfather was in custody now, facing the consequences of his actions, and the law would do its part. But Maya knew that the bikers had done more than just stand up for her. They had shown her that there was hope, that not all people were like her stepfather, willing to use their power to hurt others. Maya's eyes scanned the quiet street outside the courthouse as she took a deep breath. The night was settling in, but for the first time in a long time, she wasn't afraid. "What happens now?" she asked, her voice steady. Jack looked down at her, his eyes soft but resolute. "Now, you live your life. You start fresh," he said. "You don't let anyone take that away from you." Maya thought about those words, about the future that suddenly felt so much more attainable. The promise of freedom, of a life where she didn't have to live in fear, was within her grasp. It was a future she hadn't dared to dream of before, but now, it felt like a reality. "I don't know where to start," she admitted, her voice small. Jack put a reassuring hand on her shoulder, his grip strong and steady. "You don't have to figure it all out tonight. You take it one step at a time," he said. "And when you need help, you know where to find us." The warmth of his words wrapped around her like a blanket, comforting her in a way she hadn't felt in years. She wasn't alone anymore, and for the first time, she felt like she could breathe, like the weight of the world was no longer pressing down on her chest. "Thank you," she said, her voice thick with emotion. Jack gave her a gentle nod, his expression softening. "It's what we do," he said simply. "Now let's get you home." They walked out of the courthouse together, the cool night air greeting them as they stepped onto the empty street. Maya looked up at the stars, the sky clearer than it had been in years. It felt like the beginning of something new, something bright and full of possibility. As they reached the parking lot, Maya saw the line of motorcycles parked in neat rows. They were a symbol of the family she had just found, the group of people who had been there for her when no one else had. She turned to Jack, her eyes filled with gratitude. "Where do we go now?" she asked. Jack smiled and motioned toward the motorcycles. "We ride," he said, his voice filled with the promise of freedom and new beginnings. Maya didn't hesitate. She climbed onto one of the bikes, the leather seat cool beneath her, and strapped on the helmet that Jack handed her. As the engine roared to life, she felt something inside her shift. It was a feeling of empowerment, of strength, and of hope. For the first time in a long time, Maya felt like she was in control of her own destiny. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was living. The wind rushed past them as they sped down the empty road, the lights of the city growing smaller in the distance. Maya looked around at the riders, the people who had fought for her, and for the first time, she didn't feel like a victim. She felt like a warrior, ready to face whatever came next. And she knew, without a doubt, that she was not alone. With the bikers by her side, she was unstoppable. The night air was cooler than Maya expected as she sat on the back of the motorcycle, the engine humming beneath her. The soft wind whipped through her hair, and the world felt different. Free. She felt her grip tighten on Jack's leather jacket as the bike sped down the empty highway. For the first time in what felt like forever, she felt alive. No longer trapped in a world of fear, Maya was surrounded by her new family, the bikers who had promised to protect her. They had kept that promise. They had kept her safe. As they rode on, she couldn't help but look back at the courthouse in the distance, the place where everything had changed for her. The bikers had come for her, for a promise her father made to protect her, and they had delivered. The weight she had been carrying for so long had been lifted. The fear of her stepfather, of the man who had controlled her life for years, was gone. She was free. Maya felt a twinge of guilt. She knew her stepfather would eventually face justice, but the idea of him losing his power in the world still left a bitter taste in her mouth. But Jack had been right. There was nothing she could do now except keep moving forward. The future was what she made of it, and right now, her future was filled with the sound of roaring motorcycles and the feeling of freedom. Jack glanced behind him, his face lit up by the soft glow of the headlights. "You doing okay back there?" he asked, his voice loud enough to be heard over the engine. Maya nodded, unable to suppress a smile. "I'm more than okay," she said, her voice full of gratitude. Jack gave her a quick thumbs up, the tension in his face easing. He was a man of few words, but his actions spoke volumes. The night was quiet except for the sounds of the bikes, and Maya felt a strange calm wash over her. The vast stretches of highway were just beginning, the open road ahead seeming like an endless opportunity. It was surreal. She had been dreaming of this moment for so long. She had dreamed of being free, of escaping the shadow of her past, and now, it was a reality. The fear and the anxiety had dissipated, leaving room for hope and a sense of belonging she had never felt before. As the bike sped down the road, Maya saw the others in the group, riders who had become her family. They were all different, but there was a bond that tied them together, a loyalty, a promise to protect each other no matter what. It wasn't just about the bikes, or the leather jackets, or the rough exterior they wore. It was about something deeper, something that transcended the surface. It was about the promise to be there for each other, no matter the cost. Maya turned her head to look behind her, watching as the line of motorcycles stretched out in the distance, like a stream of light cutting through the darkness. The bikers weren't just riders. They were warriors, protectors, people who stood up for what was right. They had shown up for her when no one else had. They had given her a chance at a new life, one that was hers to shape. As they rode on, the road opened up before them, the lights of the distant city far behind. Maya felt the weight of the world slowly lift from her shoulders as she realized that she was not alone anymore. Jack was right. She was part of their family now, and family stuck together, no matter what. As they approached a small town, Jack began to slow the bike, and Maya felt a jolt of excitement. It wasn't the city they were heading to, but it didn't matter. This was her new beginning. They stopped outside a small diner, the neon sign flickering brightly in the night. The bikers began to gather, dismounting their bikes and stretching their legs after the long ride. Maya slid off the bike and stood beside Jack, looking around at the familiar, worn-down diner. It was quiet, peaceful, and for the first time, Maya felt at peace. "You hungry?" Jack asked, his voice steady as he looked down at her. Maya smiled, nodding. "More than I've been in a while," she said. They walked into the diner together, the others following close behind. Inside, the smell of fresh coffee and frying bacon filled the air, and the few people inside looked up at the group of bikers walking in. But it wasn't fear they saw in the eyes of the diner's patrons. It was curiosity, respect. The bikers weren't a threat, they were a presence. A protective force. Jack ordered coffee for everyone, and Maya took a seat at the counter. She felt the eyes of the others on her, but this time, it didn't make her nervous. She wasn't hiding anymore. She was free. As they waited for their food, Maya turned to Jack, her voice soft. "Do you think he'll ever be held accountable for what he did to me?" she asked. Jack's face grew serious. He didn't speak for a moment, as if weighing the question. "He will," he said finally, his voice steady. "In his own way, he'll have to face the consequences. But you don't have to worry about that now. You've got your life ahead of you, Maya. And we'll be here for you every step of the way." Maya felt a surge of emotion at his words, and for the first time in a long time, she felt truly hopeful for the future. The road ahead was hers to take, and with the bikers by her side, she was ready for whatever came next. The diner was quiet, the only sounds the clinking of coffee cups and the hum of the fridge in the corner. Maya sat at the counter, her fingers tracing the rim of her cup absent-mindedly. The warmth of the coffee in front of her did little to calm the storm of emotions swirling in her mind. She had just spent her entire life trapped in fear, and now, for the first time, she was truly free. But with that freedom came a flood of questions. What came next? Where would she go from here? The night before had been surreal. The bikers had led her away from the courthouse, kept her safe, and promised her that she was no longer alone. But she knew she couldn't rely on them forever. She couldn't just keep hiding from the past. She had to move forward. Jack had been watching her closely as she sat in silence, and it didn't take long for him to speak. "You okay?" he asked, his voice calm but full of concern. Maya turned to look at him. "I think so," she said quietly. "It's just, everything feels so different. I feel like I've been living in a fog, and now, it's all clear. But I don't know where to go from here." Jack nodded slowly. "That's normal. You've been through a lot. But you don't have to have all the answers right now. Take it one step at a time." Maya looked around the diner, her gaze drifting over the few patrons scattered around. She had never been the kind of person to ask for help. But now, surrounded by these people who had stepped in to protect her, she realized she didn't have to do everything on her own. She didn't have to be afraid to let others in. How do you move on from something like this?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Jack gave a quiet chuckle. "You don't just move on. You move forward. You take the pieces of your life, the good and the bad, and you start building something new. It's not easy, but it's possible." Maya took a deep breath, her eyes focused on the coffee in front of her. She had so many questions, so many things she had to figure out, but for the first time in a long time, she wasn't scared. She wasn't alone. And that made all the difference. "What if I'm not strong enough to do this?" she asked, looking at Jack. He smiled, his eyes kind. "You are," he said firmly. "You're stronger than you think. And you've got a whole lot of people who have your back." It wasn't just words. Maya could feel the truth in them. She had spent so many years feeling like a victim, like the world was out to get her. But now, for the first time, she felt like she had the power to change her story. She was in control of her own future. The bell above the door jingled as a couple of bikers from the group walked in. They gave Maya a nod. A simple gesture, but it was enough. It wasn't just about protection anymore. It was about belonging. She wasn't just a girl they helped. She was one of them now, a member of their family. "You ever think about what you want to do next?" Jack asked, breaking her thoughts. Maya hesitated, unsure. There were so many possibilities, so many things she wanted to explore. But one thing was clear. She wanted something different from the life she had before. She wanted peace. She wanted to live without the constant fear of what would come next. "I don't know," she said finally. "I want to be happy. I want to figure out who I really am, without everything weighing me down." Jack smiled again. "That's a good start." They both fell into silence for a moment, the soft clinking of dishes and murmurs of conversation in the background. It was peaceful here, and for the first time in a long time, Maya felt like she could breathe. The door to the diner opened again, and this time, it was an older man who walked in. He was tall, with gray hair, and a weathered face, but his eyes were kind. He looked around the diner, spotting the group of bikers in the corner, and made his way over to them. "You still hanging around here?" he asked with a gruff laugh. "Thought you'd be halfway to the next town by now." Jack laughed, pushing his coffee cup aside. "Nah, "We've got business here," he said. The older man gave a knowing smile and nodded in Maya's direction. "And what about her?" he asked, his voice soft but curious. Jack turned to look at Maya, then back at the man. "She's part of our family now. She's going to be fine." The older man studied Maya for a moment, then gave a small nod of approval. "Good. Glad to hear that." The words felt like a small blessing, something she didn't know she needed but that settled deep in her heart. She wasn't just another lost person. She was part of something. And for the first time, that felt right. As the bikers settled in, the night passed slowly, each minute drawing Maya closer to the realization that her life was just beginning. The past was still a part of her, but it didn't have to define her. She could take the lessons, the strength, and the courage she had gained from the bikers and use them to move forward. She was no longer a prisoner of fear. She was free. The future was unwritten, and Maya was ready to start writing it. The thought made her heart swell with excitement. She wasn't sure exactly what came next, but she knew one thing for sure. She wasn't going to face it alone. The morning sun broke through the blinds of the small diner, casting a warm glow across the room. Maya sat in the same spot she had the night before, but now everything felt different. The weight that had been on her shoulders for so long was gone. The bikers had kept their word. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was living. She had a future. Jack sat across from her, sipping his coffee, his gaze steady as always. "So what's next for you?" he asked, his voice calm but knowing. Maya looked out the window, watching as the morning traffic began to pick up. The world outside was busy, alive, and she realized for the first time that she was a part of it. "I don't know yet," she said, her voice thoughtful. "But I want to figure it out. I know I can't keep living in fear. I want to start fresh, find something I'm good at. Something that makes me feel like me again." Jack nodded, understanding. "That's a good start. You've already come further than you think. You've got a lot of strength in you." Maya felt a warmth in her chest at his words. For the first time in a long time, she didn't feel like an outsider. She felt like she had a place. As the day moved on, the bikers began to disperse, each going their separate ways, but the sense of camaraderie that filled the air was unmistakable. Jack stood up, ready to head out, but he turned to Maya before leaving. "You know, if you ever need anything, don't hesitate to reach out," he said, his voice sincere. "We've got your back. Always." Maya smiled, grateful for the offer. She wasn't sure what the future held, but she knew that whatever happened, she had people who cared about her, who would be there when things got tough. And that was enough. As the last of the bikers rode off into the distance, Maya stood up and walked outside. The sun was higher now, warming her face as she stood on the sidewalk. She could see the road stretching ahead, leading into the unknown, but this time, it didn't feel scary. She felt ready. She took a deep breath, letting the fresh air fill her lungs. For the first time in a long time, she felt like she could finally breathe. The world was wide open to her, and she was going to make the most of it. Maya didn't know where she would go next, but she knew that she wasn't alone. The road ahead was long, but she was no longer afraid to walk it. She had the strength, the courage, and the support she needed. And that was more than enough to start a new chapter of her life. The future was waiting for her, and she was ready to take it on, one step at a time. The next few days felt like a whirlwind, a blur of new beginnings and quiet moments. Maya had returned to the small town she had started to see as her new home. The diner, the streets, and even the air seemed different now that she was no longer running from her past. The bikers had left, each heading back to their lives, but their impact on her was undeniable. She was free, and for the first time in a long time, she felt like she was in control of her own destiny. Jack had kept his word. They had all kept their word. The promise they made to her father, to keep her safe, was something that would last beyond just this chapter of her life. Maya spent the next few days reflecting on everything that had happened. She took her time, sitting at the diner, walking around town, and finally feeling a sense of peace that had been missing for so long. But the question still loomed over her. What was next? She knew she couldn't stay in this small town forever. She had to move on, to create a life for herself, but she also knew she needed to be careful. She couldn't let the fear of what happened in her past control her future. She had to be brave enough to take that first step. One morning, after a quiet breakfast, Maya made her decision. She would start small. She would find a job, maybe help out at the diner, and slowly build a life that was hers. But she would not forget the bikers, not the protection they gave her, or the bond she felt with them. She would always be part of that family. Maya stood in front of the diner, the cool morning air swirling around her. The thought of leaving the small town felt bittersweet. There were memories here, good ones, and it had been the place that gave her a new start. But she knew that if she was going to truly begin a new chapter, she needed to go beyond the familiar. She needed to explore what was waiting for her outside. Just as she was about to leave, her phone buzzed in her pocket. Maya pulled it out, her eyes scanning the screen. It was a message from Jack. "We're heading out to a new place. If you want, you can come with us. We could use an extra hand." Maya smiled at the message. It had been a few days since she'd last seen the bikers, but she knew that the offer wasn't just about work. It was about being part of something bigger than herself. She looked around the small town once more, taking in the quiet streets, the familiarity, and the sense of safety it provided. But she knew that this wasn't her final destination. She had dreams, and they extended beyond the boundaries of this place. With a deep breath, she typed a response. "I'm in. I'll meet you guys soon." Maya put the phone back in her pocket, feeling the weight of the decision. It was time to leave, but this time, she wasn't running. She was moving forward, taking the next step in her journey. As she drove to meet the bikers, she couldn't help but think about the road ahead. She wasn't sure exactly what was waiting for her, but she knew one thing for sure. She was no longer afraid. She had the strength to face whatever came her way, and she had the support of the bikers, her new family, to back her up. The future was unwritten, and that was the most exciting part of all. The road stretched out ahead, a ribbon of asphalt leading into the unknown. Maya had packed her things and said her goodbyes to the small town that had been a refuge for the past few days. It had given her the space she needed to think, to heal, and to feel safe. But now, she was ready to move forward. The bikers had come back into her life, and the road was calling her. She was no longer running from her past. She was chasing her future. As Maya joined Jack and the others, the familiar sound of motorcycles revving up filled the air, bringing a sense of comfort and excitement. They were on the move again, and this time, it wasn't about escaping her fears. It was about embracing the freedom she had earned. Maya climbed onto the bike beside Jack, feeling the vibration of the engine beneath her. The open road beckoned, and for the first time, she felt truly free. She wasn't alone. She had a purpose now, and the bikers were her family, her support system. She could feel the unity of the group as they rode together, a powerful force that couldn't be broken. There was strength in numbers, and Maya had never felt stronger. The ride took them through small towns and endless fields. The wind in her hair, the sun on her face, and the sound of the motorcycles became a melody she could get used to. Maya smiled, realizing that the life she had once dreamed of was finally beginning to unfold before her. As the miles passed, she thought about what she had left behind and what lay ahead. She was no longer the scared girl who had run from her past. She was now a survivor, a fighter, and she was ready to take on whatever came next. Jack turned to her as they rode, his voice cutting through the wind. "You good?" he asked, his eyes focused on the road ahead. Maya nodded, her heart racing with excitement. "Yeah, I'm good. I'm ready for this." Jack gave her a reassuring smile before turning his attention back to the road. Maya felt a sense of pride swelling in her chest. She had come a long way, from the scared girl hiding in a courthouse restroom to a strong, independent woman riding down an open road with people who cared for her. It wasn't just the bikers who had changed her life. It was her own strength, her own will to keep going. As the group approached a small town, Jack signaled for them to pull over. They found a quiet spot near a diner, and the bikers began to gather around, talking and laughing like old friends. Maya felt a warmth inside as she joined them, taking a seat on the porch. This was her new reality. A life where she didn't have to hide. A life where she was surrounded by people who valued her. The weight of her past was still there, but it no longer defined her. She was writing her own story now. After a quick meal, the group got back on the road, the sun beginning to set on the horizon. Maya felt the cool evening air on her face as they rode through the quiet countryside, the sky painted in hues of orange and pink. The world was vast, and there were endless possibilities ahead. She didn't know exactly where the road would take her, but she knew she was ready. As the bikes cut through the open landscape, Maya found herself thinking about her father. He had always wanted more for her, wanted her to have a better life then. he could give her. She wished he could see her now, see the strength that had been awakened in her. But she knew, deep down, that he would be proud. She was living the life he had wanted for her, one where she was free to make her own choices, free to be who she was. Jack glanced back at her, noticing the thoughtful expression on her face. "You okay?" he asked again. Maya smiled softly, feeling a deep sense of gratitude. "Yeah, I'm just thinking about everything that's happened. I've come a long way." Jack nodded, his eyes soft. "You have, and you're not done yet." The group continued down the highway, the roar of the motorcycles carrying them into the night. Maya felt a sense of peace settle over her, knowing that whatever happened next, she had the strength to face it. The road was still long, but it no longer seemed so daunting. She was ready for the journey, ready for whatever life had in store. And with the bikers by her side, she knew she would never be alone. She had found her family, and they had found her. Together, they were unstoppable. As the group of bikers continued their journey down the highway, the road stretched endlessly ahead, winding through fields, forests, and small towns. The sun was beginning to dip lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the landscape. Maya sat silently behind Jack, the wind brushing past her face, but this time, she wasn't lost in thought. She wasn't running from her past. She was simply living in the moment, feeling the freedom that had once seemed so distant. The sound of the motorcycles around her became a steady rhythm, a comforting presence that reminded her she wasn't alone. The road had opened up before her in ways she had never imagined. She was no longer the scared girl trapped in a cycle of fear. She was free to make her own choices, to carve out her own path. Maya felt a sense of peace wash over her as they rode. The quiet hum of the engines beneath her seemed to drown out everything else, and for the first time in a long time, she felt like she belonged. These bikers, this family, had given her a sense of security she never knew was possible. As they approached a small town, Jack slowed the bike, signaling for the others to pull over at a gas station. Maya felt the pull of curiosity as they came to a stop. It was a quiet, dusty little place, with a few old cars parked in front and a small store that looked like it had been there for decades. The bikers dismounted, stretching their legs after the long ride. The atmosphere was relaxed, yet there was still a sense of purpose in the air. They were taking a brief break, but there was no doubt they were ready to get back on the road. Jack looked over at Maya, his expression softening as he saw the wonder in her eyes. "What do you think?" he asked, his voice warm. Maya glanced around, taking in the small town. She wasn't sure what she expected, but something about this place felt different. "It's peaceful," she said, a small smile tugging at her lips. "It feels like a new beginning." Jack chuckled softly. "You're right about that. There's a lot of places out here that can teach you something if you let them. Sometimes the quiet ones hold the most meaning." Maya nodded, feeling the truth of his words. She had spent so long in fear, so long trapped in a world of chaos and pain, that she had forgotten what it felt like to just be. To take a moment to breathe and appreciate the stillness. "I think I could get used to this," Maya said, her voice barely above a whisper. Jack gave her a reassuring smile before heading over to the others. Maya stayed behind for a moment, her thoughts drifting to the future. What would it be like to truly start fresh? To be free of the past that had haunted her for so long? She didn't have all the answers, but she knew one thing. She wasn't afraid anymore. She had the strength to face whatever came next, and she had people by her side who would help her every step of the way. As the bikers gathered their things and prepared to head back on the road, Maya felt a renewed sense of purpose. The path ahead was unclear, but she was no longer scared to walk it. Jack approached her with a coffee cup in hand, offering it to her. "Here," he said, "take a break. We've still got some miles ahead of us." Maya smiled and accepted the cup, grateful for the simple gesture. She took a sip, savoring the warmth of the coffee as she looked around the small town one last time. The sun was beginning to set, casting a golden hue over the landscape, and for the first time in a long time, Maya felt like she was exactly where she was supposed to be. The road ahead was long, but she was ready for it. With Jack and the other bikers by her side, she knew she could face anything. "Thank you," she said softly, looking up at Jack. "For everything." Jack nodded, his eyes kind. "You don't need to thank us," he said. "You've earned this. We're here for you." As the bikers mounted their bikes and revved their engines, Maya climbed onto hers, feeling the familiar vibration beneath her once again. The group set off, the roar of the engines filling the air as they rode together into the twilight. Maya felt a sense of excitement stir within her. The future was unknown, but she was no longer afraid to embrace it. She was no longer a victim of her past. She was a survivor, and now she was free. The world was hers to explore, and she was ready for whatever came next. As they rode into the horizon, the wind in her face and the open road ahead, Maya felt something stir deep within her, a sense of possibility. She had the freedom to write her own story, and she was going to make it count. The miles flew by as the bikers continued down the road, the sound of engines humming in harmony. The sun was sinking lower in the sky, casting a warm golden glow over the landscape. Maya rode in the pack, feeling the wind rush through her hair, the steady thrum of the bike beneath her. It was the same road she had traveled before, but everything felt different now. She wasn't running away. She wasn't hiding anymore. She was moving forward, ready to face whatever came next. Jack rode beside her, keeping a steady pace. Every so often, he would glance over at her, as if checking to see how she was doing. But Maya was no longer the girl who needed protection. She had found her own strength, her own sense of self. She had finally stepped out of the shadows of her past, and the world before her felt wide open, full of possibilities. The group pulled off the highway and onto a dirt road that led to a small campsite they had set up for the night. The sound of motorcycles faded as the engines went silent, and the only noise left was the crackling of the campfire. The bikers dismounted, stretching and chatting as they set up their gear. Maya felt a sense of peace settle over her. She was part of something now. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was living. Later that evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, the bikers gathered around the fire, the orange glow casting long shadows on the ground. Maya sat among them, her mind wandering but also grounded in the moment. It felt like the start of something new, something bigger than she could fully comprehend. But one thing was clear, this was where she belonged. Jack sat across from her, holding a can of soda. "You're quiet tonight," he said, his voice casual but filled with understanding. Maya smiled, the warmth of the fire flickering in her eyes. "Just thinking," she replied. "I never imagined I'd be here, you know? All this, riding with you guys. I was always afraid of what might happen, of being alone. But now, I feel different. Like I can handle whatever comes next." Jack nodded, taking a sip from his can. "You've come a long way," he said. "You didn't just survive the storm. You're stronger for it." Maya looked at him, the sincerity in his words sinking in. She had been running for so long, but she hadn't realized how much she had changed until now. She wasn't the same person who had walked into that courthouse, shaking with fear. She had faced her demons and walked away from them. She had learned that she didn't have to fight alone. "I think I'm ready to start over," Maya said, her voice steady. "I know I still have a long way to go, but I feel like I finally have a chance to build something for myself." Jack smiled, his eyes reflecting the flickering light of the fire. "That's the spirit," he said. "You've got the heart of a fighter. The world is waiting for you to take it on." The fire crackled as Maya took a deep breath, letting the warmth of the moment fill her. She wasn't sure where the road would take her, but for the first time, she wasn't scared. The future wasn't something to fear, it was something to embrace. The next morning, the group packed up camp and prepared to hit the road again. Maya felt a new sense of determination as she strapped on her helmet, ready to continue the journey. It wasn't just about escaping anymore, it was about forging her own path. As they rode on, Maya could feel the weight of the past lifting off her shoulders. It had taken time, but she was finally free. Free from fear. Free from her past. Free to live the life she had always dreamed of. The wind whipped through her hair as she rode beside Jack and the other bikers, the open road stretching out before them. The world was full of unknowns, but Maya knew she had the strength to face them. She wasn't alone. She had found her place, her purpose, and the family she had always needed. And with that, the road ahead no longer seemed so long. It was just one more chapter in a story that Maya was ready to write, one day at a time.